Okay, when you're ready, we are now streaming live on YouTube.
Good morning and welcome to E7 District Council's virtual LED monitoring forum on the 16th of December 2020. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout. And may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all phones are turned off or are on silent, and make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic blue hand and wait to be called. And all councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website at eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Dent.
Present.
Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Councillor Hayward.
Present. Thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Johns. Councillor Young.
Present.
Councillor Rowland. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. So we are quorate, and for those watching, the reason that I'm doing the instruction is that we haven't as of yet elected a chair for this group, and so for the first item of business is for that to happen. So please, can I have any nominations for chair of the LED monitoring forum, please?
Thank you, Interim Chair. Councillor Arnott here. I'd like to nominate Councillor Sam Hawkins, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that then, please?
Yes, I would like to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Are there any other nominations? I can't see anybody wishing to speak, so that's fine. So Councillor Hawkins is proposed to be the chairman. Please, can you show your support for that with a green tick, or if you're against, with a red cross, please. So if you can vote now.
For the benefit of those watching online, the vote is now taking place, and I have 6 votes for that nomination, none against, no abstentions.
Thank you, Debbie. So that's carried. So Councillor Hawkins, you are the chair of the LED monitoring forum, and with great pleasure I shall hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. So on to agenda item number 2, that's public speaking, but I don't believe we have any members of the public with us today.
No, we don't.
Thank you. Item number 3 is apologies.
Thank you. We've received 2 apologies from Councillor Jeff Pook and Councillor Marcus Hartnell.
Chair, I've also received an apology from Councillor Rowland, who's dealing with a bereavement at the moment.
Thank you. Item number 4 is declarations of interest. This will be done by roll call.
I'll start with Councillor Arnott.
I am a paid up member of LED, not a regular attender.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey.
None. Thank you.
Councillor Dent.
I'm a paid up member of LED, past trustee on the board representing the council, and indeed this morning have been to a spinning class.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
None that I'm aware of, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward.
None, thank you.
Councillor Young.
Most of my extended family are members, but I'm not.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. On to agenda item number 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency to discuss. Agenda item 6, confidential and exempt items. There are two items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way, listed under items 11 and 12. Agenda item 7, agree work priorities for the forum. So that's, I believe that's open to the forum to agree its work priorities. I don't know if there's anyone that wants to make a start, or
I'd never like to leave a vacuum, Chair. I'll be the patsy if you want to step in there. First of all, just to say, really delighted to see this new forum up and running with you in the chair. Very grateful to see such a good representation from LED as well, and our concerned officers. I think that the agenda today has done a good job of identifying what we have to deal with as priorities, which clearly are the matters of LED moving forward financially through and hopefully out of the pandemic. We obviously have to look at our contract with LED, which is coming up relatively early in the new year. Of less urgency to me is just what I hope will be a really productive ongoing conversation between us and LED, feeding back public views, but that's a sort of standing item, I suppose, on the service. And clearly today, and it's on the agenda, a serious priority is how the government are going to help still, and I think that's still unclear. But to me, those are the priorities. But just to say, really pleased that this is up and running.
No, thank you. I think I echo that comments, and I'm sure you put them much more succinctly than I ever would be able to. Obviously, we've got, I think we've got in the new year the need to the fee rework. I think is coming up, so that's probably the more pressing matter. And I think obviously we're fully aware of the fact that with COVID and everything going on at the moment, there's been a different support mechanism in place, which is possibly going to continue and be part of this new agreement. I don't think any of us can second guess what situation we're going to be in. I know there's a vaccine, but these things take time, and I'm sure just generally leisure will take time to recover as people build their confidence, if nothing else, from this. So there's a lot of ways to go, not to try and be too bleak on these matters. Has anyone else got anything else they want to think the committee should be looking at as priority area? Councillor Young.
Yeah, would it be appropriate for Peter to give a rough update of where we are at the moment after coming out of the recent lockdown, so we know where we are financially? Obviously, keeping an eye on that, we might be going into another level. Is it today or tomorrow? I can't remember. Hopefully, we'll stay the same.
Yeah, happy for an update to come in. I think that'd be useful because I think that feeds into all the other agenda items, to be fair.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to pick that up now?
Yeah, if you're happy to. Yeah,
if I may, just going back to the last item, one of the critical items going forward, which I might suggest you think about including as a regular or irregular agenda item, is energy conservation and our joint approach to reducing energy use at our facilities, particularly the swimming pools. I know at the last meeting I attended of Cabinet and Council that it was agreed that that would be looked into for Honiton swimming pool with the redevelopment of the changing rooms and reception, which I'm sure Tim Child will pick up later. But I think that that sort of approach would be welcomed if we could extend it to the other swimming pools as well, and perhaps even a wider look at some of the leisure centres. And I know Tim's nodding, because I think that's probably, again, one of the council's key priorities over the coming period. And then just moving on to give you the answer to the update, is that we've obviously had another lockdown. I think we were in another lockdown when I last spoke to you all, and we are only just coming back out of that now, and it will be difficult to tell you exactly where we are, because our direct debits from our memberships are collected at the end of this week. So until we see how many people have reactivated their direct debits, we won't know exactly where we are, probably till the end of this month. At the end of October, before the last lockdown, we'd managed to recover our membership and our income to about 70% of where it had been in 2019, which was our last full year. So our accounting year is a calendar year at the moment, from January to December, and at the end of December 2019 we concluded our accounts. And as I say, comparing to 2019, which is the last proper year we can do so, we're about 70% at the end of October. But as I say, December the mists have yet to clear. We hopefully will not get put into tier 3 tomorrow, because that would have a significant effect on us, because the leisure industry at the moment is told it can't run group exercise classes in tier 3, which is a significant proportion of our income. So as long as we remain in tier 2, we're okay, because we can run group exercise, we can open our gyms, and we can open our swimming pools. So we'll see where we are at the end of December, which is traditionally our worst month of the year. And I think once we get into January and February, those are traditionally our better months of the year, because people do have New Year's resolutions. They all intend to start using their gym membership, Councillor Arnott, and we'll hopefully see an influx in the new year. And by the end of January, see ourselves back up, I would hope, to that sort of 70% figure. And what we are, when we talk about the forecast, what we are forecasting is that we'll recover to hopefully about 80% at some point in 2021. So with that lockdown in November, and with our accounts and our memberships yet to be collected for this month, I can't really tell you other than where we were at the end of October, which is we were back to about 70% of our 2019 trading position.
Thank you, Peter. That's really useful. How does so just to help my understanding, in terms of costs, I presume some of them would have gone down, but likewise some of them would have just as easily gone up for the additional PPE and that sort of thing? Are they sort of tracking on, I guess, fairly similar lines?
They are. I think our income is affected disproportionately more than our expenditure. I mean, the saving grace for us has been, as well as the very, very welcome support from the council, is the furlough scheme. The furlough scheme allowed us to furlough staff during the lockdown period, and quite a few staff still remain furloughed. And the new furlough scheme is more flexible, so we are furloughing staff now over the Christmas period, for example. So give you an example, when swimming lessons end next week and tennis coaching sessions end next week, we'll be furloughing our swimming teachers and our tennis coaches over 2 or 3 weeks of the Christmas and New Year period. And similarly, with reduced activities in the gym and in the pool, we'll be furloughing some of the gym and pool staff as well. So that new flexible scheme allows us to reduce our staffing costs. Our staffing costs are about 55% of our expenditure. So, they account for a lot. And the other reason I was mentioning utilities is that's our second biggest spend. About 20% of our expenditure is on utilities. So 70, nearly 80% of our expenditure is just on those two headings alone. The utilities, unfortunately, once we switch the heating back on in the pool and the lighting on, that is back to 2019 levels, although our income is significantly down. So that's one of the reasons why we see, a disproportionate amount of expenditure against income. The other things are fairly peripheral costs, lots of them, but they're the two big ones which we're really working hard on controlling. Obviously, when we were in lockdown, we switched off the heating in the swimming pools, and we ran the pumps and the chlorination at a very minimal level just to retain the minimum health and safety requirements under environmental health conditions. So yeah, our both our expenditure and our income has significantly decreased, but income decrease is greater than expenditure.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. In terms of the suggestion for the agreed priorities, I completely agree that energy conservation should be one. But I wonder whether we should maybe widen it out and look at wider issues around understanding how people travel to and from all the different sites, active travel. Maybe there's already this work out there about, you know, how many of the LED users come by car, what can we do? So kind of the wider kind of active travel issue to the sites. And issues around plastics and wider environmental issues. I don't know whether that's something that Peter might like to comment on.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate to have a much wider remit than just, you know, as I was picking out the big ones. The big ticket items for us is to reduce our running costs for energy consumption in the centres, particularly swimming pools. But I would welcome that opportunity to review that. That's not something we've done. And I think the other thing I mentioned in my report, while I've got this opportunity, is as well that the council may wish to consider, perhaps not as an agenda item, but in a new arrangement, is to revisit really LED's raison d'etre. And, you know, it's been to provide core leisure activities. And one of the other things we may wish to discuss as we go forward is broadening our remit to try to make a difference in some of those more hard to reach populations. And what is coming in is a measurement of social value, as it's called. So that's something which I think I did mention in my paper, which is something we would be keen to explore with the council over the coming months, as well as how we might be more effective in trying to target and influence those more hard to reach groups who aren't using our centres enough. So that's another one I think we'd be keen on from our point of view to look at. But I entirely agree with you, Councillor Bailey. I'd like to look at a wider remit in terms of energy and carbon reduction, and travel should be part of that strategy.
Thank you. I think that's really good, with the also reaching out to those harder to reach communities. Obviously, we know I'll phrase it as a bailout was rather expensive for taxpayers. I think if you do some rough maths, it's just over 20 quid per resident for the year. So it'd be good to try and make sure that we're now reaching out to ensure everyone's benefiting from that in the big scheme as well. Councillor Bickley, please.
Oh, thank you. I'm not on this committee, but thank you for letting me talk. Really heartened to hear that. That's great, looking at all those environmental measures. The plastic one is close to my heart. So, and I think if we're offering a facility where we're encouraging health and fitness, we ought to look at what we provide in vending machines. I've had this conversation before. So plastic bottles of water, you know, I know they make money, and we have to make money, but there has to be another option of a dispenser and healthy snacks. So I'd like that to be one of the lower priorities, perhaps. A second one, if we're going to spend all this money, as we already have, £20 per person, as you say, we ought to be consulting, I think, with people and really making that link obvious that East Devon run these LED centres. You know, it's running as a partnership, trying to explain to people who own private members' gyms, you know, why we had to help LED. I think that we need to make that a much stronger link, by consulting with people and asking people what they actually want in their communities, and are we providing it, and can we do any better? And the last one, making it a priority when we are updating sites. For example, Sidmouth Swimming Pool, I believe, is due an update soon. Hopefully things will go back to normal and we can start thinking about those sort of plans, but to make them fit for purpose now. So perhaps gender neutral changing rooms, as a lot of other swimming pools have now. So really bringing them on now, because it's, you know, a lot of dads go swimming with their daughters and they need to be able to change together. So I think looking at things like that is really important. So thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Miller next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, completely associate myself with everything Councillor Bickley just said, particularly on making sure we're informing residents of the district exactly what the relationship is between the council and LED. I've certainly had a lot of people who are members of another sports club in Exmouth contact me, suggesting that that private sports club should be getting the same level of subsidy. So I think that's a really important message to get out. Speaking of the priorities of the forum, obviously appreciating that I'm not a member of it, I think it'd be good to be mindful of not spreading this forum too thin. I mean, there are some immediate priorities which, I mean, I was playing squash yesterday at the leisure centre, and I went into the gym to fill up my bottle of water, and there was literally nobody in that gym on a Tuesday evening at about 6 o'clock, which is just unheard of. I mean, this time last year, before the pandemic, it would have been absolutely full. Given that a vaccine's on its way, I would not be surprised at all if LED's income was to actually reduce in the next 2 or 3 months, because people are trying to be safe in the last few months before a vaccine comes in, with the light at the end of the tunnel and everything. So we might be in a situation where we're going to have to actually increase the subsidy in the short term. So one of the immediate priorities I see is reducing potentially the immediate running costs, and obviously we're talking about energy and doing that in an environmental way. Another immediate priority, which has been mentioned, is reducing health inequalities in the district, and Peter was talking about that, and I think that's a really important priority. I mean, LED already do a great amount of work when it comes to offering discounted membership for people who are on means tested benefits, and we've had a quite significant increase of people who have found themselves unemployed during this crisis. So that kind of work's, I think, really important, and trying to engage hard to reach communities, and I hope this forum can be a facilitator for that. And then after that, obviously, it's all about the longer term, as Councillor Bickley was talking about, the longer term investment in our facilities. And we talk about, I mean, later in the report, later in the agenda, there's talk of the wider leisure strategy. And I see that more as a long-term thing. The way I see the forum, when I was a portfolio, I had a bit of a hand in sort of helping to make the forum politically balanced, get the right people on it. I thought the immediate, the raison d'etre of this forum was to reimagine, was to ensure that the relationship between LED and EDDC was fully transparent and can be the best it can be. I mean, it's inevitably going to have to change because of the circumstances we're in now. Another immediate priority is to get to grips with this upcoming government grant that's coming in, that the LED and the council will be applying for, to get as much money as possible to cover the lost income. So see that as a massive priority. So anyway, I won't speak again. Sorry, it's been a very long time I've taken, but yeah, that's my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Brewster Sarum next, please.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, I'm not on this forum myself, but I was listening very intently just now, and I think, as some speakers have said, the key area is to reach the populations who are not using LED enough. And I think perhaps you could consider a form of campaign within the schools, like the Exmouth Community College and the primary schools, because a lot of people give up sports if they don't take PE at GCSE level. So they split at that point the enthusiasm and interest in that sort of outdoor activity. So I think maybe the LED could mount some form of targeted campaign to show schools, I know they already advertise, but they could show schools precisely the benefits of having the membership, and hopefully that would again encourage more people. And I hope that they will be able to work closely in my own ward of Littleham. And I know that my other ward councillors would support such an activity, because obviously Littleham is a very deprived area, and we would welcome any support like that we can get. So thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you. I think we're getting to the point where we've discussed several issues. I'm sensing there's a need for sort of a priority list. I think we've certainly got some fires on the horizon that need fighting now, but there's obviously the longer term strategy that's going to probably evolve with this forum as it moves forward. Henry, do we need to distill some very discrete priorities at this time, or?
Well, up to the forum, Chair. I think I think it does make sense, bearing in mind that the acute issues around the government support and the fee proposal going forward. I mean, there are some immediate issues, as you say. So, I mean, I do wonder. I mean, there's quite a list there. Whether the group's comfortable that that's recorded in the minutes and the prioritisation of that happens at the next meeting is one way forward, or you can sit and go through that now, because obviously there's quite a lot that's been said, isn't there?
There is. I would be concerned if we were to go through them each now. I can see this meeting dragging on way past everyone's lunchtime. So I think if everyone's happy, we'll take the list from the minutes. We'll do a prioritising exercise in advance of the next meeting, and then maybe with a suggestion that these are our priorities and bring that forward as an item next time. If everyone's happy with that. Yep. I see no one objecting, so I'll take that as a happy with that. Excellent. Let's move on to the next item, then, which is item number 8, review of the LED portfolio future building maintenance and investment requirements. And I believe Tim Child is picking that one up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I think the report speaks for itself, so I plan to keep my sort of introduction spiel fairly minimal, if that's okay. What I would just say, just if I get onto that, just picking up on a point that Peter made earlier on regarding climate change and energy efficiency measures. Earlier this week, I was finalising our new service plan for next year. And I think you'll all be reassured that there were 2 items on there that's related to energy efficiency measures, and in particular the LED properties, both in terms of PV array and also more generally in terms of energy efficient lighting and equipment. So that's within our service plan for next year. Part of the reason I just wanted to flag up on that now is the obvious question would be, okay, so have we therefore accounted for those sorts of measures in terms of our future investment requirements? And the simple answer would be no, we haven't, in that the figures that you've got in front of you in the report, and I'll be discussing briefly in a minute, relate very much to what's currently there and replacing and investing when things reach the end of their useful life. Now, as you would expect, if lighting reaches the end of its useful life and you replace the lighting, as you'd expect, you'd be replacing it with more energy efficient lighting. So that would be incorporated. But any works that sort of go above and beyond that, where you're perhaps stripping something out now before the end of its useful life, merely to put something in that's more energy efficient, wouldn't be included in the cost. So I just wanted to start with that because that provides a bit of context and answers probably what would have otherwise been quite a likely question. So again, I'm going to keep my bit brief. Firstly, just some context generally about this piece of work and then what it means for LED buildings. So in terms of context, my teams have been doing this piece of work over the last 2 years or so on all of our buildings across all of our general fund portfolio. We've been looking at cost and investment projections over the next 30 years alongside income projections. Clearly for the LED properties, we don't receive a rent, so there is no income, but for other properties, we've also included those income projections within this data. The report says we've done this for 95% of our buildings. Actually, I'm pleased to report that we're now probably closer to 98, 99% of our properties. It was a huge piece of work, but it does allow us now, and hopefully you'll see this in terms of the discussion that will follow this report, it allows us to make much more informed asset management decisions, to invest, repurpose, dispose of properties, asset transfer of properties. It also enables us to be much, much more proactive in planning for those works. So where in the past we've been more reactive, so something's broken, we've then urgently repaired it. This is much more about being much more proactive and let's actually perhaps renew it before it breaks. Better customer service in that instance, and financially it works out better long term to do it that way as well. because of the current discussions relating to LED, I was asked to pull together this report. So I was asked, I think probably fairly late on, to pull together this report. So hopefully I've captured everything it needed to be captured, but it did have to be produced within a period of about a day or two. So if there's anything missing that people would like to discuss, then please obviously raise. As a slightly, I suppose, wider plug for the work we've been doing, yeah, I've already said this really, but we now have this for all of the properties, that all of the buildings that we're responsible for. So quickly now back to LED and the report itself. So this report and the data within relates to 12 buildings. So we've included 12 buildings. This doesn't generally, although there's a description in the report, doesn't generally relate to land. It's just buildings only. Within the report, I set out the amount that we're going to need to invest in those buildings, and what the definitions are for investment, what's included and what's excluded over the next 30 years. At a very high level, it's showing us that we're going to need to invest £26.6 million over the next 30 years in those 12 buildings. That's reduced to just under 23 million when you account for the income we receive from the schools in terms of contribution towards costs on the shared use sites. A bit more context, we currently spend, as explained in the report, just over 700,000 per annum on those 12 buildings, £710,000. Consisting of both revenue and capital spend. What you'll see within the report is that we, moving forward, will need to spend a little bit more than that. Only a small increase, averaging out at £740,000 per annum. So it's a marginal increase in comparison. However, what the work that we've done does show us is that whilst it's only a marginal increase, it's quite heavy. The investment needed is quite heavily weighted towards the early years, where in 4 of the next 7 years we're going to need to spend £1 million or more in terms of both revenue and capital spend. So that's quite a key point, I believe, for this group to consider. The charts and graphs that are set out within sections 2.2 to 2.5% of this report explain much better than I could verbally, and much more quickly. So I would refer members to, in particular, sections 2.2 and 2.5. And this gives you really, really good key management information, which certainly from an asset management perspective, as sad as this might sound, it's actually quite exciting to have this information and to be able to use this information to make informed decisions moving forward. The recommendation that comes out of the report is merely that Forum note the content of the report and this be used to inform future strategy. As I said, the report was pulled together in quite a short time frame. So if there's anything missing, please let me know, and obviously happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I feel like this might be quite an obvious question, but I'm wrong not to ask it. I presume the amounts there for spending are for us to effectively be a good landlord, and we could spend more to be better. We could spend less but be at very strong risk of cutting inappropriate corners.
Yeah, in essence, and that was probably a good example of that is around energy efficiency measures. Clearly, when something fails, we'll replace it with, for example, energy efficiency lighting. But if we wanted to be a really good landlord and a really good leisure provider, we could obviously do those sorts of works much sooner, but at a cost. The fundamental costs within this relate to, so you're starting, so we look at the condition of each of the individual buildings, and we then look at life cycles. So we'll look at the condition of the roof, for example, and then we'll come to the conclusion that roof, it might be a flat roof, needs replacing in, let's say, 5 years, and then again in 25 years. So it would come up twice in that 30-year period. We've also allowed for landlord health and safety compliance works. because clearly there's a significant cost there. Also reactive maintenance. Also a big part of the work that my property and FM team do for our maintenance technicians is it relates to the LED properties. So there we're not instructing external contractors, but we are actually using our own maintenance technicians to physically do the works themselves. So again, all of this is costed in here. But yeah, Chair, it's to do what we legally have to do to keep those buildings, I'd say, fit for purpose.
Thank you. Simon, as I can see on the screen, is these figures currently factored into the mid-term financial plan?
These figures are, in terms of, there's an annual revenue cost excluding LED of, in Tim's report, 409,000. So that's our side on in terms of maintaining the properties and the staff involved and the costs that hit us direct rather than LED. You've got a paper later on where I need to discuss with you in terms of LED's future requests. But in terms of our medium-term financial plan, the revenue side, the 409 is in there. In the capital programme, there's an average spend that we've allowed going forwards. And what Tim's showing is that that projection isn't too far adrift from our historic spend on LED properties, so there's no surprises in that. I guess there's what members will have to bear in mind is when we do consider the total costs, including LED, is to bear these in mind. And that is quite a hefty capital programme that you're running on an annual basis for a number of properties, you know, so it's just bearing in mind the size of leisure in terms of your commitment. And probably if I was to take, well, I know this because I've done comparisons, but East Devon historically, in terms of its net budget and capital budget, spends significantly more than a lot of authorities in terms of leisure, but that's where its priorities have been over the years.
Thank you. Councillor Young, please.
Yeah, just to be clear, this is to keep the buildings as they are, but doesn't include major improvements. Is that right?
Yeah, so clearly when we will plan to replace the roofs in X number of years, the windows, doors, other key building component services, but it's not to improve. So alongside this, you would then need to consider other possible capital bids, such as, for example, there was an example given earlier, I think by Councillor Bickley, regarding the pool at Sidmouth. And yes, there is a project there that we need to take forward in the coming years. So, for example, that would be outside of this.
Can I come back on that?
Yeah.
I would now. Is there any opportunity of getting funding for improvements that we can continually look at over the years?
Through you, Chair. It's probably, oh, sorry.
Sorry, Simon, did you want to go first?
Well, I was going to say it's probably one for Peter to come in on. But yes, certainly over the years, East Devon has put his own capital resources in it, but also through LED, there's been successful bids to Sports England, etc., whereby we've got significant funding in through the LED bidding process as well.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So yeah, LED have been successful in obtaining third-party funding. There's also where we undertake improvements that benefit LED as an operator and potentially enable LED to generate more income from that particular site. Then if you look back at sort of in the recent past, at recent capital projects, LED has tended to contribute towards those themselves on the basis of a good business reason.
Yeah, if I pick up, Chair, we've been very successful in lottery bids. The biggest one was Exmouth Leisure Centre, which I think we managed to secure about £2 million, a couple of £1 million worth of investment. and are investing quite a lot ourselves, partly through a loan, Simon, from the council, which we're repaying at interest to avoid European funding regulations. So yeah, LED is very keen to support capital investment. Tim mentioned that we've got a project on the table, which goes back to Councillor, one of the councillor's comments earlier, that we do want to see the changing rooms improved at Sidmouth swimming pool. When we did that at Exmouth, it made quite a significant difference to our revenue from swimming. And just to chuck another pebble in the pond, Tim, your costs include the council's current 60% contribution to dual use sites, and that's based on a percentage of use by both parties, the school and LED. And I think another agenda item, potentially longer term, is to review some of the dual use agreements, as we are already doing at Colleton Grammar School, because if we can move some of our activities, as I've mentioned in my report, out of some of the school sites where we're getting increasingly restricted access, and move, say, our health and fitness into the community a little bit more, then there's an opportunity to renegotiate with those schools and academies that 60-40 arrangement, so that it might be more beneficial for the council, which might help Tim in the long term reduce some of those capital and revenue contributions to the dual use centres.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Sorry, it's just a very quick, probably I should declare an interest that I've got a child at Colleton Grammar School. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any other hands on this item. Pausing just in case there's a late one. So all we've been asked to do on this is to just note the report, I believe, at this stage. So are we happy to note the report? I'll take the thumbs up as a good to go. Excellent. On to the next item, which is item number, sorry, I've lost myself. Item number 9, external advice, EDDC, leisure strategy and auditing of LED monthly claims. Charlie, I think this one's with you.
That's correct, thanks, Chair. It's going to be a double header actually with Simon. Simon's going to square off the issue around the LED monthly claims, as he's been in contact with, I think it's the LGA's local partnership team, so I think he can update on the conversations he's been having with them recently. So this is just following the recent cabinet meeting where there was discussion about how the forum could utilise external advice in certain key areas of the relationship to do with LED. The two that came from those discussions were around leisure strategy and how there could be a level of external scrutiny on the monthly claims coming forward from LED in an open book process, following the similar process that LED have got in place with South Somerset District Council, and I think that's what Simon's going to talk about. So I just focus on the leisure strategy side of things. There hasn't been a leisure strategy or a leisure plan for East Devon District Council for 15 plus years. I think the last time one was produced was before my time, or when I sort of first started with the council, when the leisure services were being run in-house. So it's very opposite that we're looking at this particular issue right now. It goes without saying that despite the absence of having a leisure strategy, there's a huge amount of work that's being done in terms of delivering the physical and mental health well-being activities around sort of housing and community development teams, obviously our countryside teams, and also our street scene teams along with LED. So a lot of this has been captured under our public health plan, which I'm sure forum members will be well aware of. So for us to try and progress this discussion, and I want to sort of lead a couple of questions, if that's okay, Chair, just to start this sort of debate and discussion around this. It's what is the scope of our strategy? Is it beyond just the relationship of the relationship we have with LED? will we look at how we engage with our wider community leisure activities, such as our sort of grassroots sports and activities, sports clubs and activities that are run at a grassroots level? Does the forum want to look at this strategy at a kind of higher strategic level, or are they anticipating it being done at a much more fine-grained level, which goes into a lot more detail? Obviously, these are important questions to ask, because if we're going to draw an external advice, depending on how the forum wants to pitch that sort of approach, towards the strategy, may influence the cost of actually, drawing in that advice. So I think we need to think sort of carefully about where we want to put the sort of strategy in terms of its direction. So what I've tried to do within the paper before you is to try and sort of lead that sort of discussion. As I've sort of said, we have a huge amount of plans and strategies that have been sort of developed since the last leisure strategy was done, and those are within my report. So really trying to avoid duplication, replication, etc., when we are devising a leisure strategy. But I guess for this initial forum meeting is to get a steer really from forum members on what they see as the scope and the role of the leisure strategy sort of going forward, and the kind of the feel for what you hope to get from it. So if I leave it at that, and it'll be one of these sort of more general discussions that we can probably finesse as sort of time goes on, but it'd be really helpful from an officer's perspective, and obviously from LED's perspective. And Peter's got contacts through Sport England, accredited consultancies, advisors that can help to shape a sports strategy, a leisure strategy, for us. So if I pass it back to you, Chair, just as that is start for 10.
Yeah, may I make a comment, please?
Yes, please.
This is important because, going back to the previous discussion about funding, if we're to attract lottery funding, Sport England funding from national governing bodies, they will base that on the priority and strategic priority seen by the local authority for that bid and for that facility. So it is important that if we were going to be putting in bids, let's say for Sidmouth swimming pool, that there was a strategy which identified that the pool was a priority to the council and that refurbishing that pool was a priority to the council. Similarly, if we were looking to enhance the facilities in Axminster and want to put a bid into Sport England, then again, it needs to be identified in a council's local strategy for it to get that sort of support. So it is important, I think, to have that strategy in place as soon as possible to help us with our funding bids. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt a bit.
No, thank you. I think on a personal level, I do agree that we need to bring forward some kind of leisure strategy. A lot of things happen in 15 years. We've got a brand new town in that time space, as I have to mention. Councillor Bailey, please.
Yeah, it's obviously, thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Yeah, I think the development of a leisure strategy is really important, and it's obviously really, really important that it's done in conjunction with LED and the LED Monitoring Forum. But I'm not sure that the Monitoring Forum itself is the right forum to actually develop that strategy, because as Chai has suggested, the strategy could go way beyond, it could involve, grassroots teams. It could be much wider, and I'm not sure that whether this is the correct forum for development of that strategy, although obviously it needs to be really, really closely linked in with LED and the work of this forum.
Thank you. Just to tease out from there, do you think there's a different forum that would be better, a new forum, or am I just asking you an awkward question?
Well, maybe I could ask Henry for his views, please.
Well, I think I was just checking the policy framework document in the Constitution, and the leisure strategy doesn't neatly sit within there. So I think the default is that it's Cabinet's responsibility to develop the leisure strategy. But I do agree. I mean, the purpose of this forum, as was set out in the paperwork when it was established, is to effectively review service performance from LED under the contract, and the leisure strategy necessarily will be wider than that. And I think I probably agree that the synergy between the two needs to be there, but it wouldn't be the sole responsibility of this body to establish the leisure strategy. Does that help?
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Miller, please.
Thanks, Chair. I said I wasn't going to come back. I lied. So I completely agree with Councillor Bailey, what she just said. I think the leisure strategy is beyond the immediate terms of reference of this forum. One other idea, it might be worth referring to the overview committee. I mean, that's meant to be looking forward. I don't see overview having any particular immediate priorities at the moment. But I do think that doesn't mean that the advice that we could be getting from Sport England and potentially local partnerships. The chair and I have been in correspondence with these people. They could advise both. They could advise the forum about the immediate relationship, and they could advise cabinet or overview or whichever other forum undertakes the longer term leisure strategy, blue sky thinking. You know, they could advise them as well. So I mean, I think that might be a good way forward. That's just an idea for the forum to consider.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we need to be careful here because we are just looking at the healthy, fit young faces on this forum. I think we've presented ourselves as the people most interested from the council on this subject. And I'm wondering how many watts of green energy Councillor Dent might have generated in his spinning class indeed today. But I think this does stay with us for a little while as we develop how this external consultation should go. And it may be then we say, okay, over to overview or something like that. But I think it might be a bit of a mistake not for us to show a bit of initiative on this, having taken this initiative here. I think it's a really useful point that Charlie has made. It has been 15 years. I think Denise and Jess and various people have made points about consultation with the community as well. This is a key political point which we must keep remembering, which Councillor Miller's made, and I know Councillor Hayward feels very strongly on, which is we need to ensure that it is understood by people in East Devon that those who aren't LED members, what the rationale is for that. We do need to look at it if we're getting it right. I think we also need, in terms of accountability, which is important, because the community have asked questions about the, you know, in heavy inverted commas, the bailout. We do need to look as if we have commissioned a piece of external work that verifies, and I'm sure it will, I hope it would, but would verify that the relationship between East Devon and LED is a healthy one. And if there are any ways in which that may be, you know, recalibrated, that an external consultant can see and advise us, that would be very helpful. I think what Peter Gilpin has said as well is absolutely right. What we want to look like as a council is a pairing in unison of an authority and an external trust that are fit to go out and demand these big amounts of money from public subsidy and lottery grants and so forth, regional grants or whatever the hell the government's going to do after we leave Europe at the end of the year. So for me, Chair, I'd quite like to see us make a bit of progress on this. I think also just I'm interested to hear. I know you and Councillor Miller did have some thoughts at one stage about LGA and whatever, whether they may be a good outfit to do it. But I just think it's worth us taking it forward a bit. I think if we bunged it over to overview too soon, it might just start to gather moss. Whereas we are, you know, we're ready for this task, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Dent next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It strikes me that for this forum, our focus does need to be on the strategy of LED and how that fits into rather than the other way around, how it fits into the overall strategy and plans that we have for leisure development as a council. So I think that's pretty much what Henry was saying, that the focus for this group is LED, and the wider exploration of where we go is for elsewhere within the council, whether it's overview or whoever.
Thank you. I forgot, Simon, you're next on my list. I don't know if you want to come on the spot.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to add into a remit of scope, but certainly what I'd like to be considered is the financial aspect in terms of the asset base that we're operating at the moment, and whether that could be considered in terms of a future strategy, in terms of, I'm sure, working with LED, if they had a clean slate about what to provide in East Devon, it probably wouldn't be 7 dual-use sports centres. So it's just how you can look at that and comparing sort of the costs of running our existing assets that LED have against what a modern facilities might look like, including sort of borrowing costs to build that. If that'd be a request from me, if that could go into some sort of external advice. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I think I was muted then. Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Yeah, so I think we have to be really clear with have really kind of strict parameters on what the role of the forum is. And I think, we've already heard some concerns from other leisure providers about, LED and the council. So I think to then start developing a leisure strategy under the remit of something that's called the LED monitoring forum, I just don't think that's appropriate. Obviously, we've got this partnership and that's really important. And for me, that's what this monitoring forum should be focused on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young, please.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree that this wouldn't be the forum for discussing our sports policy going forward, because you've got to look at playing pitches, LED itself, private sports clubs, schools, and one that seems to always fall off the table is water sports, and we have got substantial water sports in our area, so we need to look at the whole aspect of sport and how LED fits into that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm starting to wonder if we should be sort of a consultee on the process as opposed to the driver of the process. Henry.
Well, yes, you kind of summed it up, actually. I was just going to say, conceptually, it is quite straightforward. Cabinet own the leisure strategy. It is for them to take the decision, and they can engage Overview, who obviously are there to help policy development. They can use Overview as a tool in that process, as they can use the LED monitoring forum. But the LED monitoring forum is contained to the contractual arrangements and monitoring LED's performance under it, and it will deal with all aspects of that. Necessarily, I think it's right that there is work within that group that will help inform the leisure strategy. But I think, as you're all saying, conceptually, it is Cabinet's ownership of it, and you've got two spokes off that which can help.
Thank you. As we have Cabinet here, I hope you don't mind me asking, Councillor Arnott, would you be happy for the leisure strategy to sit on the forward plan of Cabinet?
Well, we've got nothing else to do, Sam. So
I know you're quite quiet these days.
Yeah, no, I've heard what everybody's just said. That does sound very sensible. We don't have, I suppose, since you've raised the question, we don't really have apart from Overview. Well, listen, you guys are all going to have to turn up to Overview is what I'm going to say there then, really. We do need, a level of fresh and informed input that I've really heard here today on those other committees turning up and contributing at Cabinet and Overview. But yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure we can help progress that. Thanks.
Thank you. And I guess on to the second part of this item is the auditing of the LED monthly claims. Simon, did you want to speak on that first?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I think some members will be aware that I was having a discussion with the same consultancy firm that South Somerset use, and LED recommended them in terms of the work they've done for South Somerset. But also I picked up on the work that Councillor Miller passed on to me in terms of basically LGA local partnership, but mainly through Sports England and the consultants that they have available to them. So I've been discussing with them and have a further call this afternoon, and that to me would seem a better route to go, partly because of the number of consultants they have and the expertise they have, and I think also that could fit quite nicely into the second piece of work we're discussing. But the advantage also is Sports England are willing to part fund some of that advice, so they'll go 50-50 up to £5,000. So with the forum's permission, I think I'd like to progress that route in terms of engaging, and it will be around that first stage of advice for me as your finance officer, but also for the forum, independent specialist advice in leisure who can look at those claims and just ask the right questions in terms of reasonableness and sort of work with LED. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie, I can see your hands up. Did I miss you off the previous bit? And if so, sorry, or is it on this bit?
No, I won't take it personally, Chair. Okay. Yeah, just to very quickly, I can just go back a couple of steps before we sort of talk a little bit about Simon's similar issue about process. So if we're going to engage Cabinet and then overview, obviously you guys will want something to discuss, a framework for actually putting the strategy in place and putting a sort of strategy framework in front of you. So in terms of how we move forward, is it through the forum that we get effectively the green light to commission that initial external advice that we can then present to Cabinet, that then goes on to overview? It's just understanding the sequencing, from officers, which may reflect some, Simon's issue as well about how do we get that authority, to approve the next steps? Because obviously Peter and I can go and discuss appropriate external advisors, consultants, but obviously we need to have the decision made that we can go ahead and actually commission that. So it's just putting that back to you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be told I'm wrong, and I can see Henry's hand's just been put up, so I'm going to divert straight over there before I say something stupid.
Well, I think logically, and really this is for Cabinet to decide how quickly it wants it to come forward, but I would suggest the right course of approach would be for Cabinet to say that it wants a new leisure strategy and to authorise the advice that needs to be obtained to deliver that, whatever that may be. I think separately, this group needs to decide whether, and Simon's obviously already flagged one of them, but the aspects of the advice it wants in able to interrogate, if you like, or scrutinise the LED function. That's not to say that they're mutually exclusive. The advice from here may well feed into the strategy, but I think because it's Cabinet's ownership of this, Cabinet should receive a report saying, right, let's develop the leisure strategy, a new leisure strategy. This is the advice we want, and we want a budget to do it. That would be my advice.
Thank you. Because I've messed this up by going to Simon before we'd finish on the previous bit. Councillor Arnott, I can see your hand's gone up. Is that on this bit or on the finance bit?
Yes, just on what Henry just said, Chair, if it's helpful. I mean, obviously, Cabinet would be, and I know we've got Christmas coming up, but I mean, if there was I don't know if we can get some action going on the 6th of January, even if it's just to simply support the idea of authorising what Simon might be sorting out this afternoon, potentially with the LGA thing. Otherwise, we're going to end up leaving it another month. But
if it helps, Chair, I think the approach I would for that would be that the minutes for this are prepared and probably added as a late item to the Cabinet agenda in the new, well, if we can prior to Christmas, but if not in the new year, so that the record of the conversation here is effectively endorsed to Cabinet, which then gives you the very clear steer. That's how I would deal with it.
Thanks, Chair. That would work for us as well.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Back to the previous proceedings. Councillor Miller, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just delighted that Simon's having conversations with Sport England and local partnerships. I just wanted to sort of inform the forum exactly how I got into conversations with him. It wasn't some kind of really deliberate thing. I was in an LGA webinar, training webinar on leisure provision across the country, and Sport England gave a representative from Sport England gave a speech about how they had helped councils in very uncannily situations to ours, and they left their email address and I just got in touch with them. So I'm really pleased that Simon thinks that that's the better option, because my only concern about using the consultants from Somerset, I just think it needs to be seen to be as independent as possible. And the amount of work that Sport England have done with councils in similar situations, it gave me certainly assurance at the time that would be, it'd be real good value for money. So I hope that the forum would be able to give Simon the instruction that he'd be able to source that advice.
Thank you, Simon. Did you want to respond on that?
Yeah, just quickly. I think members are clear, but in terms of that first bit of advice I'm talking about, in terms of helping us with the auditing of the subsidy claim, that we can, with your support, engage immediately. In terms of, I'm not expecting it to be a significant sum. I'm expecting it to be within a sum under contract standing orders that I can just appoint one company or one consultant through. And we don't need to go back and run a sort of consider about a tender process or framework agreements. We could just do that one with this forum's approval if it's going to come out, as I think it is, probably about £5,000.
Thank you. I certainly feel it's important that we do get someone reviewing the figures. I don't think they'll be wrong, but it's a lot of money involved. It's good to get them checked. And to be fair, you could show me the numbers and I wouldn't know if the numbers were appropriate or not. I'd just be able to say, yeah, that number matches that number. So it is important, I think, to get the right person to be looking at these numbers. I can't see any other hands. Simon, are you looking for a recommendation from the forum or resolution?
Thank you, Chair. It'd be good to endorse for me to progress with Sports England to engage consultancy to help with the immediate checking of LED additional subsidy claim.
Thank you. I'm happy to propose that from the chair. If someone's happy to second, please. Councillor Young, I see a hand. I will take it. On that basis, then, can we do the green ticks, red crosses?
Sorry, Chair. Can I just? Are you going to be intending to move on from 9 at the end of this vote?
I feel like the answer's no to that question. It seems a loaded question.
Yeah, I was just thinking you might, if this is a sort of a closure bit, then you might want to ensure that the LED forum is endorsing Cabinet driving forward a new leisure strategy, so that that's formally recorded in the recommendations that go forward. And yes. I had a feeling, I'm forgive me, I didn't write it down, but I thought Simon also suggested other advice aside from the Sport England advice on the subsidy claim right at the beginning of this, which you might want to endorse as well.
Thank you. Simon, did you want to come back?
No, I think it was just for me to add, just to get my view in terms of the scope of what that second piece of work looks. It doesn't need to be specific. I think we'll be working on the scope of the strategy and what needs to be included in that work, and what external advice we get on it. So it doesn't have to go in specifically.
In which case, Chair, I think you just need to add then that if you're happy that the forum recommends to Cabinet to pursue a new leisure strategy, and then Cabinet obviously can have that conversation at its 6th of January meeting on the basis of your minutes.
Yeah, that'd be great to add, because I think that's pretty much where we were coming from. On that basis, if I can go to the ticks, crosses and hands, please.
For the benefit of those watching online, the vote is now taking place. So, Chair, I have 7 for, no against, and no abstention. So that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. On to item number 10, which is the Government Support Fund update. And that is a update from Simon, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as members will know, the government have announced quite early on that they've allocated 100 million to support leisure centres, basically. We've been waiting for details of that to come out in terms of it. The criteria seem to fit our circumstances in that because we're not operating an in-house leisure service, we can't claim through the government's income loss scheme. So we've been waiting for this scheme in order to make a claim. Details came out yesterday in terms of being told that a scheme is going live. The first process was to acknowledge your interest in the scheme, which we did. So we had to register that yesterday, which I did. And then we should get details of the application form. And they're looking out of that 100 million to almost allocate to interested authorities. So what I'm thinking, it's a little bit grey, but I'm thinking you'll get access to an online application portal, and I think they'll almost give us an amount that we can bid up to for our authority, but I'm not 100% sure of that. Interestingly, which is a bit disappointing, the scheme is talking about it's basically about keeping supporting leisure centres, swimming pools in terms of reopening and keeping them going in terms of the pandemic. But it's not about costs already spent up to date. So it seems to me that it's from something like the 1st of December time, costs onwards. I need to explore that in more detail. Now then, it's work I'll need to do, and we've already had discussions with Charlie, Peter and Bridget, because it will have to be East Devon making the claim, but we're going to need to be heavily supported by LED in terms of the details they will need. And obviously, I've already had a lot of positive comments from Bridget and Peter about their help in putting that claim together. And it's how we can pitch it best to help support the costs that we've committed to LED. But we're working through that at the moment. As I said, the claim form went live, well, it should have gone live yesterday, but I've only got an email confirmation first thing this morning to say that the links will be going live on the application form for me to be able to access that, hopefully today. There's quite a tight window for the claim. First of all, it's to cover costs from the 1st of December to the 31st of March 21. The claim will go live, or should have gone live yesterday on the 14th, and is live up to the 8th of January. So claims need to be in by the 8th of January, which is why I'm desperate that we get the bulk of that done within this week, really, to try and get that claim in on time and get it done before Christmas. But yeah, I will update the forum as we go in terms of what that looks like. So just to summarise, it is going live. We will make a claim. I'm slightly disappointed that the window is from the 1st of December onwards, but we'll ensure that we maximise our claim as much as we can within that period. And I'm sure LED will support me in that. And I'll keep you updated as we progress, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Simon on that report? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simon. Working on the hypothesis that at the moment we're not going to be able to claim back from before the 1st of December, what are we down, Simon? I'm trying to work it out on the back of an envelope. But are we down 700-800 grand? What's the likely amount?
That's right, Leader. It's 732,000 we've committed and paid to LED. So certainly any future ones will be logging in the correct period. And what I was wondering is that payment we've made, although it was up to September, whether there are any costs in there that are helping LED for the future periods that we could log against, but we'll need to look at the detail. But you're right, it's 732 we spent to date.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Chair. I think, unfortunately, that is a matter for this forum, but and we need to tread very carefully here so as not to prejudice the forthcoming claim. We'll obviously have to make some, political comment about that in due course, but I don't think this is the time of year for independent on blue attacks, really. But we're going to have to thank you, Alan. We're going to have to register our disappointment, I think, on that, and see if Mr. Jupp or Mr. Parish might have more in their sack than there is currently.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Young next. Oh, Peter, I saw your hand waving. Did you want to come in on that specific point?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't seem to be able to find a blue hand. I was in a meeting this morning, and I can provide a bit of an update that the meeting I was in with South Somerset this morning, the consultant there who was in touch with Sport England has advised us that now that an expression of interest has been submitted and accepted, the next step from Sport England will be they will be sending back, Simon, a form for us to fill in, which will include, I understand, I'm led to believe, a notional amount that you are going to be allocated as an authority. And the local government, or somewhere in Sport England, they have populated that figure by taking demographics and areas of deprivation and populations and things like that. So each local authority in their form or in their return will be provided with a notional amount that they are sort of encouraged to claim. And the feedback again we heard this morning was if you try to claim more, you're unlikely to get it. But if you claim up to that amount and do it before Christmas, you're likely to get it quicker. So that's some feedback from a meeting this morning.
Thank you. Councillor Young, please.
Yeah. Is there an opportunity for private sports clubs to be claiming for any funds? Because we have been approached by some of these clubs. Thank you.
Through the chair, my understanding is no, it's got to be a local authority backed claim in terms of the costs incurred by the local authority.
Thanks. Bridget, I can see your hand is up.
Yeah, just very quickly, Simon, it was 10% either way of the notional amount that they give us. If you're within that, it's likely to get approved fairly quickly. But if we're way outside that, then there'd be a lot more questions, I think, coming back to us. So just to add to Peter's update, really.
So now, Charlie, your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick response to Councillor Young. There's a FAQ that's come with the Sport England application process that could help answer those sorts of questions that may come from private leisure providers, etc. So we could get that information to our comms team, which may or may not be useful, or put it somewhere that can could deal with perhaps a flurry of inquiries about this.
Thank you. On that basis, I think we're just being asked. Yeah, we're being asked to note this update. So move on to item 11, which is the exclusion of the press and public. That under section 108(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public, including the press, be excluded from the meeting, exempt information of the description set out in the agenda. It is likely to be disclosed and on balance that the public interest in discussing this item in a private session. Do we need